Welcome to the CyberRants podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the CyberRants podcast in the year 2022. Welcome back, everybody. Good to have you. And today we are going to be talking about a new year and a new you. But actually, that's not really what we're talking about, because I think you're outstanding the way you are. There's always room for improvement. But what we're really talking about is, what are we going to be doing? What should we be doing? What should we be thinking about this year in 2022? Maybe we'll throw in some predictions. Who knows? We're just going to run with it and go from there. We're not scripted. We're just going for it. So before we dive into that, though, Mike, why don't you kick us off with the headlines?
We didn't get Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig as a new sponsor or something, did we?
Well, you will have to wait for the commercial to see that. So
Gotcha.
Find out.
All
More
right,
to
cool.
come.
So we're starting out with the 7 most impactful cybersecurity incidents of 2021. This is put together by Dark Reading. Obviously, the most impactful cybersecurity incident of 2021 is the one that impacted you directly, but this is what they put together. Log4j became public on December 10th, has taken the number 1 spot. As with every year, 2021 had its share of other big data breaches and security incidents that impacted many organizations. 1,291 breach incidents were publicly reported through September 30th, according to ITRC. That is 17% higher than the 1,108 breaches disclosed for all of 2020. But breaches weren't the only concern. Analysis of the NVD, National Vulnerability Database, showed that more vulnerabilities, 18,439, have been disclosed so far this year than in previous year to date, with 9 in 10 of them easily exploitable. So the top 7 are Log4j, Colonial Pipeline breach, the Kaseya breach, the Exchange proxy login, Print Nightmare, both of which are Microsoft, Excellion intrusion, FTP, which basically was one breach of one application and hit many. And then they put in the Florida water utility hack. I don't know if I would have included that, but that's what they put in. Elephant Beetle spends months in victim networks to divert transactions. I found this kind of interesting. Financially motivated actor dubbed Elephant Beetle is stealing millions of dollars from organizations worldwide using an arsenal of over 80 unique tools and scripts. The group is very sophisticated and patient, read nation state, spending months studying the victim's environment and financial transaction process, and only then moves to exploit flaws in the operation. The actors inject fraudulent transactions into the network and steal small amounts over long periods, leading to an overall theft of millions of dollars. If they are spotted, they lay low for a while and return through a different system. My only comment on this is, didn't that happen in Office Space and in one of the Superman movies with Richard Pryor?
Yeah, that's right. Still a penny, half a penny, fractions of a penny.
We're taking money from the crippled children's jar.
Not to prop up cyber criminals here, but Elephant Beetle is an excellent name for something like that. I mean, that's just way to go. Outstanding. I mean, we've seen a bunch of names that were just garbage, but that was good.
Yeah. Doesn't the elephant beetle eat elephant poo? I don't know. Anyways, whatever.
And they're huge and a crazy looking. Like they kind of want to make you throw up a little bit.
So welcome to the new year. Microsoft releases emergency fix for Exchange year 2022 bug. That didn't take long. Microsoft has released an emergency fix for a year 2022 bug that is breaking email delivery on-premise Microsoft Exchange servers. As the year 2022 rolled in and the clock struck midnight, Exchange admins worldwide discovered that their servers were no longer delivering email. After investigating, they found the mail was getting stuck in the queue. These errors are caused by Microsoft Exchange checking the versions of the FS antivirus scanning engine and attempting to store the date in a signed INT32 variable. So happy New Year from Microsoft. Apple iOS vulnerable to HomeKit door lock denial of service bug. Apple HomeKit is a software framework that lets iPhone and iPad users control smart home appliances from their devices. A novel persistent denial of service vulnerability named door lock was discovered affecting iOS 14.7 through 15.2. The trigger To trigger door lock, an attacker would change the name of HomeKit device to a string larger than 500,000 characters. Upon attempting to load the large string, a device running a vulnerable iOS version will be thrown into a denial of service state, with a forced reset being the only way out of it. However, resetting the device will cause all stored data to be removed, and only a couple if you have a backup. Now, to make matters worse, once the device reboots and the user signs back into iCloud account linked to the HomeKit device, the bug will be retriggered.
Just use a key, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when I was, that's a tangent. But anyway, multiple vulnerabilities in Google Chrome could allow for arbitrary code execution. Multiple vulnerabilities have been discovered in Google Chrome, the most severe of which could allow for arbitrary code execution. Successful exploitation of the most severe of these vulnerabilities could allow an attacker to execute arbitrary code in the context of the browser, depending on the privileges associated with the application. An attacker could view, change, or delete data. The problem with this is it's found in the latest version of Chrome, and they haven't updated it yet. So,
well, the other important thing here, I think, about this one is it's based on the privileges that the browser's running in, right? So if you've got everybody being admins, then the privilege is going to be in the admin shell. Right. So that's another great reason not to be giving all of your employees admin permissions.
Any of your employees, unless they absolutely have to have it. T-Mobile confirms SIM swapping attacks led to breach. T-Mobile has confirmed, grudgingly, a data breach that was caused in part by SIM swapping attacks, according to a statement from the company. The T-Mobile report, a blog tracking T-Mobile internal document, obtained a report showing that some data was leaked from a subset of customers. Some individuals had their customer proprietary network information leaked, which includes information about a customer's plan, the number of lines, phone numbers, billing account, etc. Others had their SIM swapped. Some were victims of both the CP&I leak and the SIM swaps. When pressed for comment by ZDNet, T-Mobile refused to go into detail about the attack and would not say how many customers were affected in the incident.
Well, it makes me wonder if that was in a direct correlation to some of the 2.2 billion in cryptocurrency that was stolen last year. We've seen that happen with SIM swapping before.
Definitely. And why does it always seem like it's T-Mobile getting SIM swapped? What are they doing internally that the other companies aren't, that's allowing for this? I'm sure that happens. I know it happens elsewhere, but it seems like they're the worst offenders.
Yeah, it does. I think they just have the highest employee base that will accept bribes.
Could be.
Somebody should do a study.
Are not representative of silent sector. They are lowers.
My opinion.
This show is not sponsored in any part by AT&T or Verizon.
Which have also had SIM swapping problems in the past, right? But you never know which of your employees is going to fall victim to the, hey, for 50 grand, would you push this couple buttons for me?
T-Mobile, the WordPress of cellular service.
There you go.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, seriously.
All right, and then on to Log4j. Log4j flaw attack levels remain high. Microsoft warns. Of course, Microsoft has warned Windows and Azure customers to remain vigilant after observing state-sponsored and cyber criminal attackers probing systems for the Log4j log shell flaw through December. Microsoft said customers should assume broad availability of exploit code and scanning capabilities to be a real and present danger to their environments. Log4j was disclosed by the Apache Software Foundation on December 9th. The Log4 shell will likely take years to remediate because of how widely the error logging software component is used in applications and services. Microsoft warns that customers might not be aware of how widespread the Log4j issues is in their environment, and you really need to patch that as quickly as possible. Now, there's some additional Log4j headlines. I just didn't bring them out. Log4j highlights need for a better handle on software dependencies. Log4j flaw hunt shows how complicated the software supply chain really is, and this will really help. FTC warns legal action against businesses who fail to mitigate Log4j attack. I'm not sure what they're going to do. I mean, this is a morphing vulnerability that continually gets exploited. Threatening legal action from the federal government is pointless, in my opinion. So that's a headline. Additional headlines on Log4j. There's other headlines that we did post, like a year in Microsoft bugs, the most critical, overlooked, and hard to patch. cybersecurity trends for 2022. FBI warns about ongoing Google voice authentication scams and Google Docs commenting feature exploited for spear phishing. So there's a lot going on. Check out the webpage for the headlines. With that, Laura?
For the Log4 shell, I've really kind of been watching the GitHub community, and there's just been a huge uptick since mid-December on new exploit types, new exploit frameworks for this. So, certainly be vigilant. Be vigilant about that. And I know there's just a bunch of security professionals that have just spent Christmas fixing this, right? So it's the SolarWinds 2020 Christmas all over again. So stay vigilant for Log4j.
It reminds me of the Christmas of New Year's of 1999. For those of you old enough to remember it, where I spent my New Year's Eve in a server room waiting for the world to die.
Yeah, I was in the military. We were viciously upgrading to Windows 2000. So yeah, I remember those days. All right, so for exploits this week, I've got a couple that I want to talk about. First and foremost is Beyond Trust. Okay, if you're not familiar with them, they're an authentication gateway, and they have a reflected cross-site scripting unauthenticated for their for your essentially your portal login. So Beyond Trust, I'm not quite sure how they've answered this, but some of the exploit nerds have figured out that you could do some reflected cross-site scripting with that appliance login. So if you're using Beyond Trust and you've got one of the appliances on board, or you're using the portal, make sure that you're following along their guidance on how they're going to mitigate this. The other one I want to talk about is the Emerson Dykcell XWeb 500. It's an environmental control unit, and a lot of big corporations are kind of using these Emerson devices to do control temperatures in various. And this is all across the industry: IT, this is manufacturing, this is food, right? So keeping food cold and stuff like that. There's an arbitrary file write vulnerability with the XWeb 500. So if you're running Emerson XWeb for environmental control, take a look at that and make sure that you don't need to upgrade. And then last but not least, if you are a fan of Telegram, specifically if you're a Telegram user on a Windows-based device, make sure you're looking out for the Purple Fox rootkit. This is pretty cool, just in the fact that it's being chunked. So they're using fake Telegram installers and fake Telegram updates to deploy this rootware. And then once it's on your device, well, it's like Nano Cortex or Pegasus or anything else. They're going to be able to get a lot of passwords out of your browsers, passwords saved locally, anything like that. So the root code's out there on GitHub for all the nerds that want to go check it out. Please do, and don't use it against any of us, okay? But the thread author has the kit available on GitHub. He wants you to join his community in order to get the license for it. But then I found another place where they were cracking the licenses for it. So it's going to be a mess. So if you're using Telegram, just watch for those bogus installers that are going to be coming down. All right, with that, Zach, what are we talking about today? Tell me it's comic books that are going to be out in 2022.
We could certainly talk about that. I was just going to say regarding Telegram, my Morse code's a little rusty, so it's been a few years since I've used one of those. But that's not what we're going to talk about either today. We're going to talk about the year ahead and what we have in store, what's going on, predictions, if any. So I'm going to say let's take a quick commercial break while I polish off my crystal ball here, and then we'll dive right back in.
Want even more CyberRants? Be sure to subscribe to the CyberRants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, CyberRants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
So 2022, it's going to be a good year, I think, but I think there are some predictions in cybersecurity, just like anything else. We will make advances, and I'm guessing, I can't foresee the future. I don't claim to, but I would assume there's going to be more cyber attacks, probably more vulnerabilities, maybe more than we've ever seen. Just
I'm
maybe.
I'm going to predict. I'm going to predict more WordPress and Microsoft vulnerabilities.
I feel like New Age Nostradamus here. Really getting into it. But yeah, WordPress, Google, repeat offenders, right? We're going to see some Apple, some Microsoft, some Cisco. It's just the way it goes.
It's the way it goes.
Fortinet.
Yeah,
absolutely. The Log4j, I think it's going to persist through this year. I mean, that's really kind of my accurate prediction. Well, I mean, aside from the things that we know are going to come out vulnerabilities, right? But I really think this Log4 shell is going to wreak havoc for probably the majority of this year because of all the changes that are happening and all the places that, well, like you were talking about, Mike, software component control is just terrible, right? Yeah. I mean, when we do web application pen tests, we see older versions of Bootstrap, older versions of jQuery. These components, a lot of the developers are just, if it's working, it's working, and they're not updating them. And so I think that's what's really made this Log4Shell situation really bad, is that a lot of software companies have high turnover rates and they don't know what they don't know. And so they don't know where they have these Java-based logging pieces that are gonna, be a direct impact for this Log4Shell. So I see that probably wreaking havoc through the summer, unfortunately. And maybe even kind of morphing into a different style of attack using the same weakness, right? So right when you think you got it patched, they'll find another way to leverage the logging piece from Apache against you. So that's kind of that. I guess that's my real crystal ball prediction for 2020.
And I think part of the problem is, and back in the olden days, when I started in IT, you would steal code from any place you could to prop up to fix holes in your code. And
yeah, that's right.
Because of that, you don't have component control.
Yeah, but I mean, in your day, I mean, you were stealing code in the form of clay tablets. So I mean, it was.
That's true.
Clay tablets are the original non-fungible tokens.
Hey, those paper discs that we use in those rooms that had to be cooled to 54 degrees still would be great. When you had a mainframe with 100 megabytes of space, how can you complain?
That's big. That's big time, man. Big time. Power. Yeah. Powerful.
Power. What did Bill Gates say that you would never need more than, what was it, like 300
megabytes?
40 megabytes. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Makes sense. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Do we really need it, or do we want it? That's the question, right? Technology was also supposed to make people less busy and free up lots of time in people's lives.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
that's what technology, especially with the invention of and the progress of computing power, everybody's life was going to be easy, simple, and just a breeze. We're going to be able to sit back and relax. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. I don't think 2022 is going to bring that for us either. Unfortunately, I don't think this is the year where that actually goes into effect. I think it's probably 2025. Then we get to sit back and relax. But for now, we're still going to have
the Jetsons.
Everybody will be using Linux in 2025, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another one, right? So let's talk about the security industry as a whole. I certainly see that because of all these types of attacks that are happening, and a lot of changes in the cybersecurity space. I think there's going to be an uptick in the inquisitory realm of doing business with new tech companies, right? So that security questionnaire is going to become, I think, a little more used starting now and in the future, just because of the lack of trust, right, from tech companies that have been through a ransomware or been through malware or been through third party breaches because they're doing business with a third party that they didn't check. A lot of that's happened in the last couple of years, and so I certainly see a ramp up, and we've kind of already started to see it already with some of our clients. A lot more questionnaires are coming out, and they're becoming more frequent, and they're changing the methods that they're doing it. So they don't just want they don't want you to answer the questionnaire, right? It's becoming where they're going to they're starting to actually have Zoom meetings or whatever, WebEx meetings, whatever, right? But they're having these kind of meetings with the client, and then actually asking them as an auditor would in a SOC 2 or anything else, right? Asking them to demonstrate evidence, and they're asking for screenshots of these policies and screenshots of configurations, because it's hard, because you can answer anything you want in a questionnaire, right? And if you have a security guy, if you answer the questions right, your security or your governance, risk person may say, okay, yeah, they answered these pretty right. We're going to go ahead and give them a passing score so the business can can go ahead and move forward with the sale. That's going to stop. They're going to get to the point, probably starting mid this year, where they're actually going to be doing more of these kind of video based inquisitions for your cybersecurity posture, so that you're having to not only answer the questionnaire, but you're also having to demonstrate evidence in a meeting with a risk team that's asking you very specific questions of the service that you're providing. So, I certainly see that, starting to ramp up this year for sure.
And I got two comments on that. So you're starting to see an industry that's springing up that's kind of a middle industry that is the communication point from, or facilitators of communication between the company that needs the service and the service provider, and they're doing the review and providing data back to the company that needs the service. The problem with that is a lot of the auditors don't know anything, and B, you're not able to communicate. They are looking at it in a black and white check the box methodology, as opposed to looking at I've run into this. We're not seeing compensating controls being taken into effect. We're just seeing a black and white check the box, pass, fail. So that industry needs to mature, because otherwise we're going to have lots of problems.
You'll get a false sense of security, right? A false sense of risk with things like that happening. And not all auditors don't know anything. I mean, the book smart auditors are really hard to deal with, because they can't translate technical controls very well, because they've never engineered anything, right? And so they're and typically that's a low level, they'll bring in kind of interns and things like that to conduct these kind of questionnaires. And you're right, Mike. It's kind of scary, because it's going to give companies a false sense of risk that may come back, unfortunately, right?
Well, they're trying to create these clearinghouses too, where it's automated, where you upload all your data to these clearinghouses with all your security controls, and then you subscribe to the service, and it'll provide you a score on each vendor. Well, if one of those gets breached, that's huge, for one. For two, there's no justification, there's no communication, there's no, why are you doing it this way? Well, this is why we justify doing this. Why we have these 10 compensating controls in place that completely mitigate this risk. And that's where we're losing the ability for small companies to be able to facilitate their security and be able to communicate it to potential clients. And I think that's going to become a problem.
It'll be interesting to see too what happens with the compliance requirements and regulations, audit requirements. I mean, we've seen over the last couple of years, of course, demand for things like SOC 2 and ISO audit going through the roof. I think that will continue to increase, but I also think that some companies.
I just want to get that out. I love it. It's my favorite thing ever.
SOC 2, it's the jam. But SOC 2 audits, you got to have them now as a service provider, any type of technology service. It's basically become a requirement.
Is your favorite part of SOC 2 the fact that it takes a whole year? Is that what it is that makes it your favorite? Is that
I love 12 months people and reading their documentation.
Well, this is a good, just a segue, an opinion in the data hoarding, right? That you were talking about, these third-party clearinghouses, right? And we've seen just a terrible amount of companies that are saying, send me all your policies to review. Okay, well, you want to do business with me. I'm a small company. I'm going to send you all my policies, but now I'm violating my own policies by not sending you a security questionnaire, because now you've got all of my documents. You've got my architectural diagrams. You've got my data classifications. Right. And so what do you do with that? Are you just sticking it on an internal SharePoint site where everybody in your company has access to it? And so it makes this kind of like a weird gray area. And my advice to companies that are getting these security questionnaires and they're saying, send me your acceptable use policy. Like, how about no? How about How about you do what all of the highly intelligent companies are doing, and they're just scheduling a meeting, and they're asking to see your acceptable use policy, making sure that it's got the right stuff in it, right? Like, you've dated it and you've checked it, and they can take a quick screenshot of the front page and to basically ascertain that they've reviewed the acceptable use and it does meet minimum requirements, right? You don't need to send them this 14-page document that they're going to stick on an internal SharePoint site that everybody's going to have access to, and they're going to forget about it, right? They're going to, because this is for a sales process, so the risk team's going to grab all your documents, they're going to throw it in a pile, and they're going to move on to the next company. Next thing you know, you've got 150 gigs of random company files that you probably shouldn't have. Right. So, my advice to anybody listening out there that's doing this security questionnaire stuff, be smart about it. Okay. Don't be a data hoarder. If you need to review a company's document set, do it. Do it in a Zoom meeting. Do it in a WebEx meeting. Do it, do it in person. Anything is better than, accidentally becoming this data hoarder of sensitive files on behalf of some other organization, right?
Well, you're also then liable, right? If you get breached,
absolutely.
So why acquire additional liability?
Yeah, exactly. And then, now you're responsible to answer the company's questionnaire because you've got their documents set. So,
it just reminds me of, taking other people's documents is like, no, honey, I won't post these new pictures of you if we break up.
Revenge prawn, revenge compliance.
That's how it goes. They'll leak it out to the dark web, and it's gone.
Yeah. Look how crappy these documents are. This company failed me, and I posted all their security policy.
Well, another, I don't know if there's another, right? It just showed up in my crystal ball just now, but it'll be interesting to see how many audit firms and how many other firms that are compiling massive amounts of data from other companies about their security programs, and how many attacks are targeted toward those types of companies, right? Because that's the gold mine for a cyber criminal, right? Not just the critical systems like we saw, with Microsoft Exchange and SolarWinds and such, but getting the inside scoop on many companies' information security programs through one breach.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That will probably happen.
It probably will. Yeah, no, it's it's not a crystal ball. That's a ball ice cube in your Scotch whiskey. So let's just be straight here. Okay. Zach does not have a real crystal ball. He's drinking whiskey with a sphere ice cube in it, and he's staring into it. So,
and I say that, I regret saying that, because if and when it does happen, I just hope I'm not a suspect. These are assumptions, right? That's kind of the problem with cybersecurity predictions, right? You say, oh, this type of organization there's going to be a big breach. Well, that's just, you could close your eyes and throw, a dart at a map, and you're going to hit somewhere that gets breached. I mean, that's kind of this. So we are not prophets here. We do not, this is just off of assumptions. And there's plenty of garbage out there on the internet that says, all the predictions for 2022. We don't claim to be that, right? I mean, and some of those things are good. So there's some good information out there and interesting stuff. But let's just instead be proactive and be prepared for what could possibly come up against us, right? Let's do that. Just like in combat, you're not going to try to predict every single possible outcome. You're going to try to predict the most likely occurrences, plan for those, and then have lots of different, contingencies, emergency plans for all the other stuff that could go wrong. So
that's relevant because, this is cyber warfare. We are in a cyber war. We have been in a cyber war for 20 plus years. So, I think that's an accurate statement, Zach, that you got to just kind of predict for what's going to happen to you and what organization, what space you're in.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I don't know what I was going to say. We created our own battlefield, right? We by adopting all these latest and greatest tools, we've left behind some of those tried and true practices that still work and would prevent a lot of this. For example, off-site, offline backups. How many companies don't do that? Everything's online, and they get corrupted, and they get to, simple things like that. I worked at a very large company, and they were like, well, we back everything up to the SAN in another location. I said, what happens if there's corruption? And they're like, well, we just restore from backup. I said, does corruption travel? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, well, then you don't really have a backup solution, do you?
No, and a lot of the breaches we've seen, in 2021, the recovery times were horrible, largely because these companies believed they were backing up enough, and they absolutely were not backing up at all as much as they needed to. And so I think, most of the outcomes from some of the breaches that we've had some firsthand, kind of experience with. Right. One of those outcomes is a highly frequent backup, highly frequent.
Well, and test the backups, test your restore. I can't tell you how many times I ask a client, how long does a full restore take? I don't know. We've never tried it.
Yeah, that's a very common answer. So yeah, no, that's a huge point. Is 2022, if you think your backup methods are adequate, just take another look at them, okay? And play the part that malware's eradicated your whole organization. How long is it going to take you to recover? And if you're using Kubernetes, I understand that's different, but for like mainstream IT stuff that's still kind of happening in a large majority of the organizations that are out there, you're probably, you might believe your backup methodologies are sufficient. I just beg you to please review your backup methods, because
test them.
And test them, because we've had lots of organizations that we've kind of investigated that have believed that they had enough backups to recover quickly, and that was not the case. It's taken some organizations over a month to recover from some of these attacks. So yes, sir. Good point, Mike. Very good.
I'm pretty sure with our hundreds of millions of listeners out there that somebody is going, oh crap, I need to do this right now.
If that's you, if you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Don't wreck your car if you're listening to this in the car. Don't drive it.
Like a doctor telling somebody they have cancer, and it's like, oh, not a good situation to be in. But
okay, so let's stare back into Zach's into whiskey crystal ball, and the one other prediction I'll say is that cyber insurance is going to get a little more fierce and competitive in the next year to 2 years.
And more expensive.
And what it's not going to be like, oh, you're a company, your cyber insurance plan is going to cost you $100 a month. No, they're going to be actually sending you. They're going to be sending you questionnaires saying, okay, what does your security posture look like today? And those answers are going to directly affect your pricing and your coverage, because they're liable, right? I mean, if a breach happens, they have to spend a ton of money to send people out, give you money to help you recover. So, just like car insurance, they're going to start looking and be like, well, how bad of a driver are you? Okay, well, you've had like 6 DUIs. Yeah, I'm not going to give you you're not going to get full coverage insurance for $100 a month. I'm sorry.
Right.
So, I think that industry is going to change quite a bit, and it might even happen sooner than we think, because they're taking all of the liability of the cyber insurance companies, and they're going to start looking at their losses and saying, well, okay, what do we need to do to make sure these companies are actually in a good place before we start insuring them? And right. So, you think about that, right? So I think a lot of these cyber insurance policies are going to change. And I believe we had a good podcast episode of that in last year, right?
With Tony Robbins.
Yeah, with Tony Robbins. Absolutely. So yeah, if you didn't hear that, go back and listen to it. That was a lot of good information for everybody who's jumping into cyber insurance to try to get that to cover their businesses for ransomware and cyber attacks and those sorts of things.
Well, and one of the things that's going to pop up is there's going to be some kind of shadow system, like the credit reporting, where the insurance companies are going to get together and say, this company's not insurable, this company's not insurable. So you can go shop to 20 different companies, and they may do a lookup to this and go, you're not insurable, based on our initial analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we need to do is create kind of like Carfax, right?
Yeah.
But create CyberFax, and you get a black eye. It goes on your report there, and not to say that past occurrences are what's all the investment legal jargon, past events are not indicative
of future events,
future outcomes or results. Not to say that, but it would be interesting to see. I think that something like that, that's very, very feasible for something like that to pop up, which could be good and bad. I think the downside to that is that more and more companies, there's already, I mean, we know so many companies cover up their breaches and never say anything, never report anything, but that could make that worse if
Well, look at
if
the
that
T-Mobile thing
happens.
that we talked about in the news. I mean,
Yeah, their attorneys basically gag everybody, right? I mean, Home Depot is a great example. That hack had been in place for almost a year, and then they didn't report it until 6 or 7 months after they remediated the situation.
Yeah.
That was probably largely because they were scared their stocks were going to go down if they said anything about it. So they wanted to make sure before they announced anything that they had it all under control, because they didn't want to tank their value. And so, yeah, you see a lot of this kind of, I don't want to call it underhanded, but I mean, it kind of is, right? I mean, your responsibility is to report it. I mean, especially if your incident response plans say you need to report out to your customers in 24 hours. Clearly, some of these companies are not doing that. And I largely believe it's, attorney based. You're telling them, no, they don't say anything yet. We'll let you know when to say something.
Anything, yeah. Now, the other thing that I see that's kind of detrimental is there are companies out there, and I'm not going to name them, but that do the scans of your IPs, and they list out all your vulnerabilities, and it's available on the internet for you to pull that down and get a score. And it's not necessarily indicative of anything that you're doing, right?
Yeah. Sometimes they don't even have your right IPs.
Yeah, and you have to pay them to have them rescan and pay them to have that data removed. It's basically extortion, right?
Yeah, and what about honeypots, honey nets, and all that? I mean, how they can't take it, stuff like that into account. A smart company could have a bunch of vulnerabilities from the outside perspective, right? But that it could be there for a reason,
Right.
It just some of that stuff. Well, it's the cybersecurity gold rush, right? And there's another prediction for you. The more money is going to flood into the cybersecurity market, causing people to create things that aren't really moving the needle in terms of reducing risk, but are very much just endeavors that are made to pump up a certain stock or create a bunch of investment dollars and let people cash out for high rates of return, and ultimately not protecting more organizations. And on top of that, though, I do think the consumers of cybersecurity and cybersecurity services are going to start doing their research more. I think they're going to get smarter. I think they're going to start seeing that these companies that just roll up a bunch of little IT companies or something like that into one and then slap on the cybersecurity label, I think they're going to realize, okay, this isn't actually what we need, or these certain tools that maybe they provide a nice dashboard, but they're not actually helping to mitigate risk. These aren't the answer for us, and maybe we need to get back to the human element.
They create a false sense of security.
Right. That more word about that stuff will get out, and the market will be better educated over time.
Going back to where it's the Maginot line of cybersecurity.
Yeah, and there's no technology that's going to solve all your problems, right? There's a lot of cool marketing stuff that's happening to make you think that something might save you, and unfortunately, there's not a technology that's going to be a qualified human that's actually looking at the issues for you. So keep that in mind.
Well, it's things like requiring FIM, right? And FIM, I get it. I understand why we need it, and there's certain companies where you just got to have it. However, if you're a small company and you get some kind of FIM module and you employ it in your environment, who's going to review all that data, all the positives and false positives and everything else? You got to have resources to do that, right? So then you're looking at outsourcing things like that, and that's things to keep in mind. I mean, it's a great tool, but what are you going to do? How are you going to manage it? Buying the tool by itself isn't going to solve any problems.
Yep.
No, FIM and SIM, I have huge heartaches about, right? And I think we talked about that in the book. Yeah. They seem to be meaningful, but it's a lot of, it's like painting for gold, right? And I mean, you may have hundreds of tons of pay dirt to pull out a 1 gram nugget, and it's very maintenance intensive. It's very false positive, remediation intensive, and most importantly, it takes people to look at this data, build tickets, go track it down, just to find out that somebody didn't change their password on their phone, and the phone's trying to log into the Exchange server with the previous password. It's like, oh my God, we're getting hacked, and that's just not the case. It's just employee Bob just forgot to change his password on his phone, and you've how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in man hours have you spent to find that out, right? Is that really beneficial to the organization? So I completely agree with you on FIM. It certainly has its use in the industry, and it certainly has purposes for certain computing systems and certain companies, but it's not for everybody. And it certainly takes a lot of tuning, right? I mean, it's a big undertaking to put in something like that. You just can't plug it in and be like, okay, watch this system. None of that works that well.
Why do I have a terabyte of log files all of a sudden?
Yeah, that nobody's looked at. You know what I mean? And so, but they'll sell you that, right? Oh, plug this in. It'll stop anybody from, modifying the computer or modifying this. And they don't tell you, what I suggest is if you're thinking about SIM or FIM, whatever product, download the manual. I'm not going to say RTFM because all my engineers out there know that. But look at that deployment guide, the administrative guide, and figure out if you're going to be able to do that with the one IT person you have already that's 110% utilized. So don't jump into it just because some framework says you got to have it. Okay, there's certainly other things.
Well, gentlemen, we have we've predicted a lot here, and maybe one or two of those things will come true, but probably more. But I think a lot of what we're talking about here is just the natural progression, the natural evolution of what is going on in the cybersecurity world. And we sprinkled in some good information about tidying up your cybersecurity program this year. So a lot of good discussion, and we will certainly have more in the coming weeks. But our time is passed up here. And I do want to give you guys both an opportunity to leave us with any final remarks before we close it out.
I'm sure our listeners are about done at this point. So have a wonderful drive to work.
Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, add something to the risk register. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Check your backups. Test your backups.
There you go. Well, my scotch is about empty here, so time to sign off. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and have a wonderful new year. Hope your year is going well already. Lots to do this year, but lots to look forward to as well. So keep plugging away, keep improving, always get better, and by all means, reach out through LinkedIn, through our website, cyberrantspodcast.com, which, as Mike said, you will also find all the links to the news articles that he talked through and a bunch of other good information, previous episodes, all that good stuff. So thank you for listening. Be sure to rate the podcast, comment, let us know your thoughts, and share your ideas for future topics with us. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Pick up your copy of the CyberRants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the CyberRants podcast.